Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, the host of the Muddy Waters podcast, and we're just going to get right into it today. And today we have with us the mayor of Portland. Thank you for joining us, Mark Dion.
Thanks, Chuck, for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted, partly because you're the mayor of the easiest city, I think, to be a mayor of in the state of Maine. I figured it would be fun to get you on and have some conversation about who you are. Do our normal thing where we talk about like who you are, where you come from, and then we'll get into like talking about some of the challenges you face, as well as I think you have an interesting story from some of the stuff I've heard from some other people, and then also. I think how you got elected is also itself an interesting story. And so, yeah, I just like, who are you? Where do you come from? And how did you get to this place where you're in one of the most challenging positions, I think, in Maine politics, at least at the local level in the state. So,
well, thanks. That's quite a tall order to answer in one day. Oh my God. Yeah, I ask myself who I am every morning in the mirror when I'm shaving. Trust me. Given what crosses my desk. Well, I grew up in Lewiston, got out of Lewiston High School in 72, came down to the big city of Portland back when the University of Southern Maine was the University of Portland Gorham, Pogo U. Did my studies. I started out as a biology major. I was trying to satisfy my mother's dream that I'd be a doctor. And then I took an elective in criminology, and that ruined her dream, but put me on my path to eventually become a Portland police officer. I served there for 21 years, left as deputy chief. Had acquired my master's along the way, so I thought I might be a police chief at some point. And instead, the sheriff took me out to lunch to share with me his idea that he was not going to seek re-election, but thought for all sorts of reasons that I would be a great sheriff, a good replacement for him. And so I changed course, ran for election, initially ran as an independent on the premise that there's no Democrat or Republican way to manage a jail or deliver police services to about 14 communities in Cumberland County. So I ran against a marquee Democrat candidate, and there was a Republican candidate as well. But historically, the Dems always took the seat. And I beat the Democratic candidate. I think it was like 3-1. So I inherited the toughest hotel in Maine, the Cumberland County Jail, 600 beds. The patrol side was a lot easier. I told my chief deputy, you can be the police chief, but I've got to be the warden of this institution and try to make it make sense. So I spent 12 years there and became intimately aware with, concepts like social disorder, chronic mental illness. Back then, we called it drug addiction, not substance use disorder. And heroin was starting to knock on the door pretty vigorously during that time. In my second year of being sheriff, I was asked by the dean of law school to submit an application to attend, as they were going to start a part-time program. I had previously gone when I was a detective to take some special courses. I thought maybe a detective ought to know criminal law. It would make it easier.
Be helpful.
It proved to be very helpful. At least when I put a case together, I could at least offer a little bit more informed perspective on some of the issues. Well, nonetheless, I was accepted to law school. Contrary to some myths that the county paid for it, they didn't provide a single penny. I did go to the commissioners, ask their permission, say, look, if I can go part-time, are you okay with it? If not, I'll pursue it at some other point in my life. They said, no, why would we not have a sheriff who understood the law? They expanded that idea. For all the elections afterwards, I was always challenged on that piece, even though it wasn't true. I paid for it out of pocket. And it did give me a wonderful education. And I think as the leader of an organization, some skills to better assess risk and responsibilities. So I was a lawyer, sheriff. After 12 years, I decided I wasn't going to run for reelection, that it was time to go out and practice law. And nobody believed it. My chief deputy, right up to the day he delivered his signatures to go on the ballot, he turned to me and say, "This is a strategy, right? Like you're going to just pop up now and say running." And I said to the current sheriff, who did replace me, I says, "Kevin, it's not a strategy. I'm just being really candid. I've given everyone a year's notice. I'm going to leave and open up a small practice and see where that goes." And then I had been in practice 6 or 7 months, and the Democratic Party came to me to run for the House, which I did. So I spent 8 years in Augusta
Wow.
learning that machine and the internal mechanics. Um, when I first arrived, leadership said, "Oh, you probably want to go to criminal justice." I said, "No, you're typecasting me. I want to go to energy." And so I went to energy and enjoyed my time there and really got involved in the minute details of energy policy. It's complicated. You know, top line messages don't always work. It's as much engineering as it is about law or
Yeah.
regulation. I eventually chaired the committee, as well as being asked by a speaker to chair criminal justice when they went through a whole docket of gun bills. They thought um, I would be able to manage that. So I think the best compliment I ever got as a chair of a committee is when members of the committee, as well as lobbyists, said, "We're never sure where you're going to come out on an issue because you run the meeting in a very objective, neutral fashion," which I thought was my responsibility. I didn't put my thumb on a scale. To every member of the committee voiced their opinions. And then I'd have an argument, but I wasn't trying to advance my personal argument as much as making sure we did good work and moved through our schedule, addressing bills as we should. I ran for the Senate, was elected. They sent me back to energy, which was fine. It's always fine to go energy and utilities. There's never a lack of good policy to be working on. And they put me on the marijuana implementation committee. Back when I was sheriff, I was the first law enforcement officer. I held a news conference to declare that we should legalize medicinal marijuana, that we had been engaged in our own hypocrisy about the threats that come from cannabis, and that we should see our way clear to provide was legitimate medicine to folks who were having some chronic disease or fatal disease for that matter, so they could have access to whatever benefit cannabis would provide. So that's why Senator ended up actually in the rules around creating a market.
Hmm.
So I ran against
Interesting.
Janet. I ran against the governor for the governor's post.
Oh
As we all
yeah.
see, that didn't work out well.
Yeah. Yep.
And since I sacrificed my Senate seat to engage her in the primary, um, I went home, as all good politicians eventually have to do. And that lasted for a little while. And then folks wanted me to run for council. I did. I served 3 years. And at the end of that term, I ran for mayor. And here's where I'm at now. So,
Nice. Well, definitely a great resume in terms of just all the got a law degree, been county sheriff, House, Senate. Obviously you're and I think one of the things I like about you, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, is that like you're not you don't appear to me to be this like highly partisan individual, and like willing to push back in some ways against people, even on your own side of the aisle, which is something that I think is sorely missing in our country these days. um
yeah, what I like to say is, being a Democrat informs my thinking. I mean, it's a lens, but it doesn't control my judgment. Um,
Yep.
I think one of the failures is the inability of some to see good ideas from what they see as competitors or worse yet, evildoers. I don't have time for that. I think I don't. I mean, I think people elected me each and every time to go up there, represent their best interests, the common sense best interests that we all share,
Wait,
and to get
common sense?
something that
I didn't think Democrats used that phrase. I thought that
I,
was an alt-right phrase.
you see, I don't pay attention to that. I mean, look, I go up there to solve a problem. I'm always looking as how do we solve the problem. I recognize there's some passionate perspectives that are clashing. That's great. That's thunder and lightning. What are we doing post rainstorm, to
Yeah.
solve the issue? So I don't demonize people. I mean, I felt pretty good that after I was elected mayor, some of the first phone calls uh, that I received to congratulate me were from colleagues who happen to be Republicans. You
Hmm.
know, that's how I look at it.
Yeah.
I may disagree with their policy, and I've told them so directly, uh, but it's not about them as a person. I don't translate that into that I must be talking with Satan now. You know what I'm saying? We
Yeah.
demonize the opposition. They have families, they have values, they have a commitment to their community. I don't disregard that. The good people of wherever they came from sent them forward. So who am I to judge? Okay, where they should judge us is how do we approach policy together and get something done? You know?
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, I think that, I'll kind of leave out what I would call the globalists or the global elites or whatever, or my favorite phrase I think is the global parasites. But I'll leave out the globalists and say that aside from them, I think the majority of people who are in office, regardless of whether or not I agree with their perspective, especially at the local level here in Maine. At a national level, that's a whole different story. But the local level, I think they believe, even if I think they're way wrong, they believe that what they're doing is for the betterment of the people around them. Obviously, there's always corrupt politicians who are really, doing backdoor deals and stuff like that. And so, obviously, there's some of that. But the majority of people, again, whether I agree with them or not, believe that what they're doing is in the best interest of the people of Maine and the people of their town and whatnot. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it's healthy to villainize people. I do vehemently disagree with a lot of Democrat policies, but the people, again, they believe that this is what's going to help.
Well, I would rather talk about policy rather than put a partisan label on it. I mean, I worked hard when I was chair of criminal justice. We looked at the gun bills and we spent months talking to each other. We had the Sportsmen's Alliance involved, the NRA. It was so easy to fall into stereotype positions, but I was blessed or lucky to have members of both parties who really want to take a stab at trying to get it done correctly. I mean, the Second Amendment to me is about responsible gun ownership. What do we want to do about that? You know, we have to talk. We have to talk, and more importantly, listen first. Not only to those who want to reduce the number of firearms in the community, but those who have them and how they have a need or an expectation that can be part of their lives. You can't disrespect that either. It's tougher to do work that way. You're probably winning policy measured in feet rather than yards, but it's going to go on long after we're here policy making. So I don't try to think that I'm going to provide some savior's response to every problem, but I can put things in place that somebody else can capitalize on in the future and move the ball. It's about moving the ball. It's not necessarily crossing the goal line. That might be somebody else.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and it sounds like you weren't involved in with one of as much in some of the shenanigans that sometimes go on up there. Because I just went up and testified in a bill to protect girls' sports, and like it seems like there were some things that not everybody understood and knew about, and they were done intentionally to ensure that less people that were in support of the bill were there to testify. And and I hear about a number of other different shenanigans that happen from time to time, is like they don't let people know what they're doing until the last moment, and then it's more challenging. Anyway, like it sounds like your approach, is like,
So,
this doesn't surprise me about you. It's more about like you actually want the people to be heard. You want to have discussion. You want to work together to come to an actual conclusion rather than just trying to get your way.
yeah, it's not. If you go up there with the idea you're going to get your way, I don't think it's going to be as satisfying an experience as if you can walk out of the dome and say, I think we got something done today. And the other attitude, I'll be up front, and I've said it on the floor of both the House and the Senate. I try to apply common sense. If my constituencies decide we're okay with that, it's time for you to come home, then I'll go home. I've never seen any position there as a path to be there forever. Everything comes to an end, and once you start to think that you're indispensable in the political arena, is exactly the moment you become irrelevant. That's me, right? So that's what I draw my confidence from. That's what I draw.
Where's your God complex?
I don't. He's up there.
Up there, okay.
Humility could become popular again. I hope. I mean, none of us have the whole answer.
Yeah.
None of us have to be there forever.
Well, and I think you talk about none of us have the whole answer. I think this is one of the problems that we have in our political landscape today, is that we are so divided, right? This is where, like, as a Democrat mayor coming on a conservative podcast is like, it's not a normal thing. It's at least, it's not something that happens a lot, right? Largely, we have a hard time finding people that can get and be in the same room and disagree on some things and have conversation. But the reality is, none of us want to agree at this point. We're so divided that we just see everything that comes out of this other side's mouth as being a dishonest lie, and we have to question it and judge it. And everything on our side, we just completely trust. And first of all, that's a problem, right? Like, we need to, if we're going to be really critical, we need to be really critical of both sides, right? And not just the one that's on the other side of the aisle, but also, like, part of what was good about this idea of liberalism, and I don't mean like American liberalism, I mean like classic liberalism, is that, and the idea is that in a world where we have a diversity of thought and a diversity of ideas, we can actually reach higher levels of truth, because we have openness, and we can discuss, and we can see things from different angles. But our world is increasingly becoming one where we're siloed, and we're in our own echo chamber, and so we're not talking to the other side, and so both sides are missing important elements in their solutions.
I think one of
generally speaking,
I think one of the underutilized concepts, it's talked about, but whether or not there's a commitment to it, and this comes from classical liberalism, is you've got to work at keeping an open mind. It is so difficult to do. That's my standard. Have I really, really committed to hearing the other side? If you do that, you might actually start to understand how that argument they presented to you is framed and what they're really talking about. Sometimes there's something beneath the surface that they're trying to resolve. And that's why I'll appear on anybody's podcast. I mean, the opportunity to meet someone, get new ideas, gain perspective. If you're going to be in leadership, whether it's in the private sector or government, you've got to understand where everyone's coming from. And for me, I try to distill that. What's the common sense moral of the story? What's the unifying theme? Right now, we decide if it comes out of someone's mouth on the wrong side of the equation, it has to be totally disregarded. And that doesn't further anyone. I mean, and once in a while, and I just learned that recently when I publicly said I was wrong about something. And everybody goes, "Oh my God!" No elected official goes to the podium to inform people they made a wrong decision. But I did because I think that's how you build trust,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of my favorite quotes from Winston Churchill I don't even know if it's actually from him, but it's from the movie Darkest Hour. It's, at the end of the movie, he gives this huge speech, and he had reversed course on what direction he was going to take. And somebody's like, "You've changed your mind, I see," and he's like, "Those who don't change their minds don't change anything." And so I think that, like,
That's a great quote. I'm gonna look it up.
yeah. Well, again, watch Darkest Hour. It's definitely in the movie. Whether he actually said it or not is definitely in question. But yeah, I mean, it's important to have. If you claim to have an open mind and yet you never change your mind, then you're claiming that. I mean, like you probably don't have an open mind, I guess, is the reality. Because if it was open as new information came, you would change your perspective, because that's how things work. There was a time in my life, for instance, where I was completely opposed to any form of legalization of marijuana, right? And I'm not in that place. And part of the reason I'm not in that place, and part of what was shaping that, was some stuff that had happened in my family, and
Okay.
seeing how it had impacted people in my family. And I was just like, nope, it's just bad, right? But over time, as I've learned more about, like, the evils in particular of the pharmaceutical industry, I'm like, well, marijuana is a lot better than a lot of that stuff, at the very least, for a medical perspective. And we don't need to get into it anymore, but, like, from in a medical perspective, like, there doesn't seem to be, I mean, it seems to be a lot better than a lot of the stuff that the pharmaceutical companies are selling. So,
I mean, I think that, to sum it up, I think the story of marijuana is the story of trying to work with open mind about something. Each side had strong conclusions already in place.
yep.
We didn't like marijuana because it came to us in a concert T-shirt and blue jeans. But if it comes to us in a lab coat, we don't
Right.
question it at all. So I think that's always been the struggle and will continue to be a struggle. But
Yeah.
it does require some creative thinking.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think is a really hot button issue, I would say, in American, well, in Maine politics, I keep hearing, and I don't 100% agree with this sentiment, that the problem and the reason that the Democrats control the House and the Senate and the governorship right now is ranked choice voting. And I look at it and I say, can you point to me how many cases in Maine did somebody win by ranked choice voting? And the only one I can think of, first of all, I don't think it applies in the legislature, or it definitely doesn't apply in the governor's race. So it doesn't impact those races at all. So that's a silly thing. It is the reason that Jared Golden became the representative in CD2. But it's also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the reason that you're the mayor in Portland. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm only chuckling because on election night, I was clearly winning the popular vote. And as a matter of fact, the oldest of my granddaughters, who at the time was 6, she went up and she said, "Pepe, did you win?" So I picked her up and went to the front of the room, and I says, "No, I haven't won yet, because tomorrow's the electoral college." Now, she had no idea what I was talking about. My crowd kind of laughed because we had to go through the ranked choice process. So then I showed up with the other candidates, and they put all the ballots through the machine, and I ended up winning with about 650 votes after ranked choice was put together. And
So are you saying that you had the most votes of anybody?
yeah,
Or,
I mean,
oh,
one
you did
on
have the
on
most
yeah, on head to head,
first
I think
place
I got
votes?
like 40. I had like 44% of
Okay.
the popular vote, but head to head, I if it had just been simple majority, we would have been done that night.
Oh, okay. So see, this is I was under the impression that you wouldn't have won if it hadn't been for ranked choice, but you would have won anyway.
I think so. I mean, I'd have to go
Okay.
back because interestingly, the ranked choice tally, I assumed I was going to get a bump from a certain other candidate, right?
Yep.
there were buses. He's probably the only one that would have been on my bus. Everyone else was definitely on another bus.
Yep.
And he did so poorly, I received nothing as a bump. Someone who did very well on the other side could vote for him, and but at the same time, they voted for me strongly. It's almost as if their heart wanted candidate X, but their brain told them, if you want to run the city, you got to give your second vote to Dion. So it was an unexpected resource. It was
Hmm.
definitely electors that kept two different ideas in their head. Good for them, good for me.
Yep.
And that's how I became mayor.
And what was it? I feel like I know the answer to this question, but what were the issues that you were primarily running on? Why do you think it is that you know, as a more moderate? I mean, you're more obviously a more moderate Democrat just based on this conversation, but I kind of knew that, you know, anyway. Moderate in the sense that you don't just do what the party tells you to do. You think things out and you try to think of common sense solutions. But you know, and obviously Portland is not known as being a moderate Democrat hotbed. Um, so like, how is it like? What did you run on, and how did you win essentially?
Well, I ran on the idea that my understanding of the community's common sense is they wanted a city that was safe. They were tired of how municipal government was approaching drug abuse as well as the homeless situation. Um, I had so many people come up to me and say, "Look, I'm a I am a real liberal, but I'm voting for you." You know, because I propose the idea that if you're not safe in public spaces, if you don't feel safe in your neighborhoods, then nothing else can work well for you. And we have to clear out the camps. I wasn't going to negotiate anymore. I think their disease was such they forfeited their right to make their own decisions in their best interest that we had to be assertive, clear them, and get them into shelter so that their needs could be addressed. It's like, I think what I learned from being a police officer and a sheriff, you can negotiate for a long time because time's on your side. But there comes a moment we're done and you've
Yep.
got to make a decision, you know, and you've got to move forward. So I think people identified with that. I think they identify with the fact that, and they said it out loud, is the experiences I've had seem to all make sense for the mayor to possess. You know, whether it was in law enforcement, whether it was being an advocate in court, and I was a defense attorney. So it's not like I was a prosecutor. I
Yep.
represented the very people that I had to engage as a mayor, but I knew the reality. I know that what's the common term now? Lived experience. I didn't
Yep.
know it needed the adjective. I just call it experience. So I think my experience compared to my opponents, they were talking about a green economy and electric vehicles, la la la. I said, hey, all I want to do is to stop the flooding at Jay's Oyster Bar. You know, I
Yep.
think I tried to keep the message clear that I value this city, I love this city, and we had to be honest with ourselves about what we were going to do. It wasn't about trotting out a whole bunch of platitudes and programs. It's about being very specific. And I promised that we would have a cohesive council. And I hope I've delivered on that so far, and that I wasn't going to go to war with the city manager. She's too important a variable, and we become good partners in this process. So, yeah, I think people voted for me for a sense that I would provide stability, and I wasn't going to back away from hard decisions. Remember, I've always said if I make bad decisions, and I'm human, then you can judge and send me home in the next cycle, and that's okay. That's the way it's all supposed to work. And if you're satisfied with what I've done and we decide I should move forward, then I will.
Yep. No,
I
makes
mean, I think
sense.
my message was simple and it was to the point.
Yep. Yeah. No,
So
and
somebody
I mean
says,
those things. I think running on public safety, you know, and cleaning up obvious problems that the vast majority of people in Portland knew about. I mean, you want to have compassion for people, but at some point, like, you have to recognize that, not that you stop having compassion, but that you stop enabling. I think is one of the things. It's not
Well,
compassionate to enable, and you have to actually address problems and make it
yeah, I
safe
mean,
for people.
listen, if the government's going to do something for you, you have a responsibility to do as well. You got to work, you got to try to take care of yourself in that transaction. I mean, and there was a sense in the community, we are enabling behavior, it never stops. And it appears that the recipients are not taking account for their own behavior, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and they're able to do that. If they're separated from substances and alcohol, they can get there. It's not easy. None of this is easy, but it has to be done. It's
Yeah.
like, and what I've tried to do on the council is, if we're going to discuss something, let's get to a decision point. We can't just talk things to death. We got work to do. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm old school that way, but I have an agenda,
Yeah.
and I got hired to do a job, and I got to get the work done.
Yeah. So what would you say is like? So you were elected. Is almost. Are you running again soon?
No, I'm like 6 months into my second year.
Okay. Okay. I couldn't remember
Because
how long it had been.
we get installed the 1st of December.
Okay. And
So
so
they
it's
don't
a
wait very
three-year
long.
term. 3-year
4
term, is
years.
that 4-year
4 year
term? Okay,
term.
for me. Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I understood. So what so far? What has been, if you had to say, like, what's been your biggest success, and then also, what's been maybe the biggest challenge that you faced?
Well, I think
And
the
then
biggest the,
then we'll get into some more challenging questions.
I think the biggest challenge the city is facing is housing.
Yeah.
If you want to grow the economy and create more jobs, it's real difficult to do if your potential new employees don't have anywhere to live. I'm also concerned about the fact that for those who already have employment in this city, I think they're feeling a little crushed by the ideas. How long can I afford this apartment before I have to leave the city? Yet I am providing that middle. We talk about the missing middle. They're the ones that clerk our banks, our paralegals, who work in retail or in a restaurant. The people that actually make the city work. We talk about it at
Yep.
my level, but they actually do the work. So
Yep.
I'm worried about that. And I've heard employers say, we filled the position only to have it turned back on us because they couldn't find housing.
Yep.
The second piece for this city is our battle with the governor and the legislature around general assistance. And, we had a couple of hundred, 400 tents in the city when I took office. Now there's less than a dozen at any given day, because we continue to press. If you put a tent, we're right there giving you notice you're going to go. The shelter's working. It's not lauded very much, but we're placing people in available housing throughout southern Maine, to see if they can succeed. Yet somehow, somewhere, it's been decided Portland is evil. Here we go back to
Well,
all that.
I don't know that, like, I maybe evil is the way it's presented, but like we had Jack Ducharme, he's in the legislature, on here. He's on the whatever it is committee,
The
the
appropriations.
appropriations committee, yeah. And I think the staggering thing for the rest of the people in the state of Maine is that 80% of general assistance spending in the state by the state is spent in Portland. And
Let me put it this way: it's not 80%; it's 86%.
okay, 86, even higher.
No, but let's get our facts out straight. That's all.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the correction. That doesn't help your case, but
Well,
but
actually it does.
okay.
Here's what I say to folks up in Augusta: we spend almost every GA dollar. Nothing to argue about there. Math is nonpartisan.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
but I says the other part of the math problem is 63% of our clients came from a community outside of Portland. So, what?
Still within the state of Maine?
So within the state of Maine,
Okay.
63%.
Okay.
All right. And then about 20%, and all these numbers float. So I'm not, they're not fixed like a budget, come from out of Maine.
Yeah.
So there's 14, 15, 16% of the folks that are in a Portland shelter have a legitimate claim that they actually were Portland residents before they found themselves in this status. And then you go to the statute, like I want to get up in the morning and win the GA race. Okay, I'll use a term other than evil. I'm trying to win. I don't know, some other mayor opened the doors. Those are all fun things to talk about, but not relevant. The law says, where do you live, Chuck?
I live in Westbrook.
All right, so you show up in Portland.
We get some of the overflow.
No, you don't, because they all bring them over here. Even your old mayor's admitted to it, sheepishly, but they've admitted to it. But the point is, if you came in tomorrow and said, you know what, I don't have a place to stay, and I think I want to live in Portland moving forward, we have to take you. All right? There's no ability for us to turn it away. There is a statute that says we can prosecute the town. Good luck. As a lawyer, that was a fantasy bill. Right? Can you imagine a docket right now, including a charge against a community to pay for a homeless person? It's an exercise in futility.
Yeah.
If we could, and we can't even pass a law or an ordinance that says you have to demonstrate you've been in the city 18 months, 9 months before you're eligible for our shelter services. So
why not?
Huh?
Why can't you pass that law? Is it because of the state laws?
It's a state law and a constitutional interpretation. Okay. So I told the folks,
yeah,
I said, why don't you work on those issues? That could change the fabric. I'd be happy to send everybody home, but I can't.
It's a very interesting point, and I think something that a lot of people don't think about is a big part of the reason you're spending money is people are coming from other places in the state because they know the resources are there. But that then there's the other question of is Portland, by the way in which they handle these situations and the services, are they attracting people? Is that part of the problem?
Look, I look at some adjoining communities, and they're doing wonderful things and part of their city or town, and I have counselors, even residents, says, why can't we do X? I says, do they have a health and human services budget? Well, no. Oh, okay. Because they don't want to. All right. I mean, no town gets up in the morning and says, I see what's going on in Portland. I think I want to enter that game board. My couple is see if I can win the monopoly of poverty. Somehow, like there's an advantage to winning. So it's kind of an oxymoron. If Bangor or Portland, and now Lewiston's trying to do it, provide services, it acts as a disincentive to smaller communities. Like, why would Westbrook in their right mind get up one morning and say, we're in. We're going to build a big shelter. We'll take care of our folks from here and wherever they come from, because now they'll claim they want to be in Westbrook. I think shelters should be a state function and paid directly with state dollars. I don't want to win this race. By God, if Gorham opened up a shelter and they carved into that, the pie is designed by statute not to be fixed, but to expand based on demand.
Yep.
I'll go on record. I would like to lose this race.
You would like it sounds. I wish we were in and I think there are some policy things that could lead to this, but I wish we were in a place where we weren't dealing with as much of these problems. We could get to like how like a significant portion of people that are homeless have drug addiction and mental health related issues that what kind of like I think half of what we need to think about as a society, and this is not necessarily for you to answer. I think this is well outside of the mayor of Portland's hands, but is like what are we doing upriver? that's creating this environment?
Yeah.
And that's the real question, because like I think you are to a degree between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that in order to accept general assistance at all and be able to get reimbursed for it, you have to play by the state's rules. If you don't play by the state's rules, then you don't get the 70%, I think it is, reimbursement from the state. And so half of the reason, or a significant portion of the reason that you spend as much as you do, is that you're mandated to by the state in order to qualify for the state
Yeah.
funding.
Listen, this is an example of what we talked about earlier. I would love to be able to sit in any conference room, begin the conversation. What do we mean by GA? Once upon a time, it was helping out a needy family or an individual, and it was seen as very short term, very limited resources. That's not the case anymore. It's really become a default housing strategy.
Yeah.
Like when the governor said you can't house them in hotels, it's not sustainable. Yeah, common sense should tell everybody that's not the way to provide services. But when we had people out in the winter, in the freeze, I mean, I had some families out there. You got to get them in somewhere. But once she declared that, we withdrew. Then she opened up a hotel in Saco to try to do the same thing. So we knew it was about us. We were going to consume too many hotel rooms. When South Portland's hotels were, from their perspective, somewhat overrun, it was from Portland. I mean, I had some nights we had over 1,000 people. We had to figure it out.
Yeah.
Where are they going to sleep? So we need to talk about that, and what do we want to do? And I would only hope the other side, I would just suggest to them that, listen, I don't have a problem talking about how much we spend in state dollars. That's why I corrected you, because there's nobody else in there waiting in line for those monies, by the way. No one. No other mayor or city managers called up and said, hey, Dion, you're costing me money. No.
Right.
I mean, they're like this, praise Jesus, right?
Happy to have you
figure
handle
this
it.
out.
So
So I'm hoping with the next governor, or maybe with this governor in the time that's left in her administration, we can just get real about the problem, get beyond posturing. I mean, we just taken them to court. I want to sue them on their concepts to flesh it out.
you've taken who to court?
We just filed suit against the Department of Health and Human Services for how they define their understanding of shelter and what's appropriate to pay. I mean, they conducted their own study. I always like using the evidence of the prosecution. They conducted their own study, determined that those shelters that do exist, and many of them are small specialty shelters, they were about 100 to 107 a day. We were coming in at 87. Her team proposes 44, which once you calculate the percentages of what the city pays and what the state pays, would give us about $31 a bed. And my dog, when I board him, right, he's $75 a day, and I have to supply the food and the bed, right? So
yeah.
So I guess my dog gets a better deal than what cities will get in trying to manage unhoused individuals. So no, we're in court. I have to get the administration to declare how they get these numbers and the fact that it costs what it costs. People always think there's a way to run down the cost. There's not. I mean, what the legislature is considering would remove 100 beds from our network. That's fine. I told some of the members of appropriation, if that's what you want to do, I have no control over it. You have to make a decision. But I just want you to know those 100 people will still be there. Right?
Yeah.
Now flip to the other chart that the people elected me mayor because they don't want to see that kind of disintegration on the street. We're in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think again. I think that no matter which side of the aisle you're on, we're in a challenging situation. One is a rising cost of taxes and all that other kind of stuff, and just becoming a burden, especially as the governor continues to sign spending bills that taken our state budget from basically 7 billion to 11 billion in the course of 6 years, which is a wild increase and a higher percentage increase than the vast majority of us have gotten in pay during that period of time. And we're all going to have to fund it, and it's impacting industry and all these other things. And then, dealing with situations where, we have a real problem with homelessness, and we need to figure out a real solution. Um, and I generally agree that the problem primarily is not the cost of rent. It's the mental health and the other
Yep.
issues that are primarily causing your homelessness. And so the answer, although we do need to address this, right? And I know you got limited time left, but we do need to address the issue of housing. But I don't think that housing fixes the homelessness problem itself. Although, like, one of the I guess the last question, because I think I've got to, we both probably have to get going, is around housing. You mentioned that being one of the challenges is people not being able to find housing, and obviously your city has rent control, and that is something that discourages, I think, investment to create more housing, and then you also have like some of the most difficult and frustrating and painful building code management in the state, where I had somebody who was working on doing some improvements to his house, and he was waiting to hear back from their office for months and months and months and months, and he was actually waiting, and they were getting irritated with him and basically saying, look, we know you've already done the project. We'll eventually get it approved and you'll be fine. And it's like, what are we talking about here? But like there are some real challenges that help, I think, keep Portland in a place where there's not a growing amount of housing. And what's your response to that? Or do you have any plan to address or tackle that?
Well,
There's a lot there, I know.
yeah, like a bar exam, like 4 parts to one question. Listen, when I ran for mayor, I talked about the housing piece. We got to get to yes more quickly. Um, there was a 7-year process, and I did some of those years as a counselor, where there's been a complete revision of our zoning ordinances and codes. Some of the building codes that people are frustrated about exist in every community. But we're dealing with thousands of units at any given time for a number of reasons. If it's taken months and months, I would told your friend, too bad they didn't call the mayor. When people call me, I run it down quickly.
Good to know.
I think rent control was an ill-considered idea. Insofar as I understand that tenants feel the pressure of the market, but when you distort the market with rent control, it creates its own negative consequences around investment. And the part of rent control, what it failed to recognize, and it's so much like a partisan initiative in the sense that we got our win, but somebody had to have an adverse consequence for that rather than have a unified solution. Landlords can't invest in the capital maintenance of their buildings, and they're given little or no leverage to modify the rent when there's a tenant turnover.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that a landlord would say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to convert these to condos and see what the market will bring. Um, I think there's a way to maintain some sanity about rent increases, but recognize that not every landlord's a millionaire. I mean, my own father offered me an apartment building. I declined because I recognize there's a lot of work in managing a property. Sure, we have some corporate landlords and we have some bad actors. And we
Sure.
need to
Absolutely.
we totally take it and exploit tenants. They should be held accountable. But I
Yeah.
think in the final analysis, 3 or 4 years from now, somebody will look back and say, it was the first people that enjoyed the benefit of rent control that it made sense for. Everybody else was hurt by it, and
Yep.
it's going to be hard for future tenants to find a rent control unit. And that kind of like sends an echo from New York City, right? There's such a battle for and about and surrounding rent control units in their city. So I think if we continue to press on zoning and we do some reforms around Green New Deal, some advocates passed a pretty significant piece of municipal legislation. I think people tend to vote top line messaging around a piece of legislation. They didn't read the details, and it really hampers developers from building something more affordable. The legislature has authorized me to put together a social housing task force, and I'm drawing from various people in the community to see if they can jumpstart more change in that line so that we can have housing for the middle. We're okay building subsidized housing. There still continues to be adequate funds available from Maine State Housing for that. And the market is taking care of top line, luxury
It's the
apartments,
middle.
whatever. It's you and me. I mean,
It's
I don't know what I'm going to tell a young cop or a brand new nurse, or a radio broadcaster where the hell they can live and not eat up 60 or 70, 80% of their income achieving that.
Yeah.
I grew up in an apartment. I didn't have a single family detached home till I purchased one with my wife. So I enjoyed apartment living growing up because we had other families we were connected to. It can work for some, but we got to do something about it. I tell developers, stop talking to me about 1 and 2 bedroom units. We have more than enough. I want 3 and 4 bedroom units.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a
Right?
huge need for that. Yeah.
That's where we got to put our money. So I'm hoping that this task force will shine a light on this so the council can act. I mean, we got to build up. Portland doesn't have a lot of land left. We are going to become a real city in time, and these are
Yep.
those first steps. And I think people
Yep.
want to live in that density because you can have a complete neighborhood. You're living upstairs, like the old nursery rhymes, the candle maker, the cobbler, the grocery store, the pharmacy. It's all there. You should be able to walk to it. We don't have to regulate cars. All we have to do is create neighborhoods where the car is not essential. You can just get outside. I mean, if I lived in New York, would I have a private car? Probably not. More likely than not. Or even Boston, for that matter.
Yeah.
It works.
Yep.
So that's my answer today. Check with me next week.
All right, sounds good. Well, I would love to see. I think policies, whether they're claimed to be good for the environment or not, need to fit with the reality and the situation. Is we need more housing and more housing in Portland, more housing in the greater Portland area. And I think one of the things that gets in the way of that, generally speaking, we've talked about a lot, is regulation. And I think a lot of the regulation, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is actually coming from the towns. The towns are the ones, not the state, that are getting in the way of some of the building that needs to happen. Don't get me wrong. The state's doing enough of their own, I think, to impact this problem. But I think the towns and the cities, I think, need to loosen up. And I think it's good to hear that you're trying to make things move faster and within building ordinances and not ordinances, but getting things passed, getting things approved. And if anybody has an issue with that, they should reach out to you. I think that's
please reach out to me. I respond as quickly as I can to any citizen inquiry. I think that's the least they can get from me, and I'll dog it for them inside the building if necessary. But I think the towns, I'll close with this. Many of the things the state is pushing, we had already made decisions about prior to their initiation. We have. I think what these towns and cities are going to confront is something we're confronting even in Portland is, wow, we all need housing, but this is going to change my understanding of what my part of the city should be or what
Right.
my town is. You know, we
Yeah.
we have such an attachment to sense of place, and if
Yeah.
somebody changes that, you
Well, it's
know,
like we want to move forward, but we want it to stay the same.
yeah, or
You know, everything,
yeah,
they want it, they want the neighborhood to look the same as it was, and always be the same. And it's just like,
it,
reality is time changes. It's and things are going to change, and they need to, in order to, like, I think the humans living here, it's more important for us to adapt and adjust, and maybe that's going to cause the area to look differently, but we have people who need places to live, and therefore, if we've got to build, hopefully not an ugly building, I've heard, but if we're going to build, a bigger building, we need to be open to that possibility, because we're changing. The world is
what,
is changing.
for sure, the city is not going to look as it does today 20 years from now.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
and that's why I tell citizens, participate with planning board, participate in any commission looking on the use of land. Those are important considerations, and we have to recognize if we build denser, then you can have public transportation that makes sense. I mean, I once stood out at my bus stop near my house. I live in a what you call a typical suburban neighborhood, and I had two people pull over and ask me if I was okay. Is there something wrong? I was at first puzzled, and then I go, "Oh, it's because I'm standing at the bus stop." I said, "No, I'm all set. I'm taking the bus." And one of those persons looked at me like I had eight heads, you know, and they drove up, and I actually took the bus to work just to check on how things are doing, you know.
Yeah.
But we have to get over that hump,
Yeah.
you know, that it's okay to take the bus,
Yeah.
you know, like other
Yeah.
cities do. It just becomes routine. Changing habits is tough,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah. No, people struggle with that for sure.
Well, we'll see what all these new gubernatorial candidates have to say about these kinds of issues. I know when they're meeting
Yeah.
with me, I tend to, as one counselor told me this morning, you're so characteristically blunt. I go, well, let's get to it,
Yeah. No,
right?
absolutely. And it'll be really interesting to see, what these candidates look like, and who comes out on top on each side and in the middle, and who ends up being there in the gubernatorial seat. But I think we're both people who would agree that we want somebody in there who's like serious about actually addressing problems, not somebody who's coming with a bunch of fluff and are just going to sit by and cause things to get worse rather than get better.
Yeah, if they come forward and they have two or three ideas and they're actually 100% committed to solve those two problems, that's a lot.
Yep.
That is a
Yep.
lot to do. Yeah, I told one I'm done with the platitudes. Can we get down to the real menu? And I
Yep.
want to see if I'm on it. You know,
Yep.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's important. So, all right,
All
it's
right. Well, thank
fun.
you so much for coming on. We went a little bit over what you had allotted. I appreciate you taking the time, and just being willing to talk with somebody on the other side of the aisle, so to speak. And I appreciate that, even though, again, there are probably plenty of areas where we could say that we disagree. That you are somebody who's looking for common sense solutions, that actually, again, I say actually, but help in reality, not just, again, my biggest annoyance in politics is people who present ideas that sound good but actually in practice are not good, and so I'm
Well,
interested in
listen,
the ones that do the work.
I've enjoyed our time together, Chuck, and call me anytime.
All
All
right,
right.
sounds good. Will do.
Okay, later.
All right, have a great day. Bye.
You
Thanks,
too. Bye.
everyone.